Welcome to EXHIBE FLIX again. Today we are going to talk about film noir, a very special genre that many people like, and particularly because it relates to classic film, it relates to cult film. Let me tell you, film noir is a cinematic term used primarily to describe stylish Hollywood crime dramas. We can see this in many movies that Humphrey Bogart made in the 40s and 50s. And even today we can see it as an example like the movie Sin City, directed by Robert Rodriguez. Particularly those that emphasize cynical attitudes and sexual motivations. The 1940s and 1950s are generally regarded as the classic period of American film noir. Film noir of this era is associated with a low-key, black and white visual style that has roots in German expressionist cinematography. Many clear examples of this can be seen in many of the gangster movies from the 40s and 50s that featured Humphrey Bogart and also actors like Peter Lorre. You can see that in the cinematography. And also another example could be a more modern movie that's in color, Seven, by David Fincher, with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. The term film noir, French for black film or dark film, was first applied to Hollywood films by French critic Nino Frank in 1946, but wasn't recognized by most American film industry professionals of that era. Cinema historians and critics defined the category retrospectively. Before the notion was widely adopted in the 1970s, many of the classic film noir were referred to as melodramas. Whether film noir qualifies as a distinct genre is a matter of ongoing debate among scholars. But it's undeniable that its influence can extend to directors like Martin Scorsese with movies like Taxi Driver. Film noir encompasses a range of plots. The central figure may be a private investigator, a plainclothes policeman, an aging boxer, a hapless grifter, a law-abiding citizen lured into a life of crime, or simply a victim of circumstance. Although film noir was originally associated with American productions, the term has been used to describe films from around the world. Though film noir is often identified with a visual style, unconventional within a Hollywood context that emphasizes low-key lighting and unbalanced compositions, films commonly identified as noir evidence a variety of visual approaches, including ones that fit comfortably within the Hollywood mainstream. While many critics refer to film noir as a genre itself, others argue that film noir is not a genre. Film noir is often associated with an urban setting, but many classic noirs take place in small towns, suburbia, rural areas, or on the open road. Setting, therefore, cannot be its genre determinant, as within the Western. Nor does film noir rely on anything as evident as the monstrous or supernatural elements of the horror film, the speculative leaps of the science fiction film, or the song and dance routines of the musical. The aesthetics of film noir are influenced by German expressionism, an artistic movement of the 1910s and 1920s that involved theater, photography, painting, sculpture, and architecture, as well as cinema. The opportunities offered by the booming Hollywood film industry and then the threat of Nazism led to the emigration of many film artists working in Germany who had been involved in the expressionist movement or studied with its practitioners. By 1931, Curtis had already been in Hollywood for half a decade, making as many as 6 films a year. Movies of his such as 20,000 Years in Sing Sing and Private Detective 62 are among the early Hollywood sound films, arguably classifiable as noir Italian neorealism of the 1940s. One of the main influences for the tone of the film noir was the Second World War, basically sending home traumatized and stressed men and women and going back home and starting a new life. Basically all that stress and all that hopelessness was reflected in those movies. With its emphasis on quasi-documentary authenticity, wasn't a knowledge influence on trends that emerged in American noir. The primary literary influence on film noir was the hard-boiled school of American detective and crime fiction, led in its early years by such writers as Dashiell Hammett, whose first novel, Red Harvest, was published in 1929, and James M. Kane, whose The Postman Always Rings Twice appeared 5 years later, and popularized in pulp magazines such as Black Mask. A decade before the classic era, a story by Hammett was the source for the gangster melodrama City Streets, directed by Ruben Mamoulian and photographed by Lee Garms, who worked regularly with Sternberg. Released the month before Lang's M, City Streets has a claim to being the first major film noir. Both its style and story had many noir characteristics. Some critics regard classic film noir as a cycle exclusive to the United States. Alan Silver and Elizabeth Ward, for example, argue, with the Western, film noir shares the distinction of being an indigenous American form, a wholly American film style. However, although the term film noir was originally coined to describe Hollywood movies, it was an international phenomenon. Even before the beginning of the generally accepted classic period, there were films made far from Hollywood that can be seen in retrospect as film noirs. For example, the French productions Pepe le Moco, directed by Julien Duvivier, and Le Jour se levait, directed by Marcel Carné. In addition, Mexico experienced a vibrant film noir period from roughly 1946 to 1952, which was around the same time film noir was blossoming in the United States. In the post-classic era, a significant trend in noir crossovers has involved science fiction with movies like Blade Runner. Film noir has been parodied many times in many manners, and they also come in darker tones as well. Murder by Contract, directed by Irving Lerner, is a deadpan joke on noir with a denouement as bleak as many of the films it kids. An ultra-low-budget Columbia Pictures production, it may qualify as the first intentional example of what is now called a neo-noir film. It was likely a source of inspiration for both Melville's Le Samurai and Scorsese's Taxi Driver. Belling its parodic strain, The Long Goodbye's final act is seriously grave. Taxi Driver caustically deconstructs the dark crime film, taking it to an absurd extreme and then offering a conclusion that manages to mock every possible anticipated ending. Triumphant, tragic, artfully ambivalent, while being each all at once. Flirting with splatter, status, even more brazenly, the Coen's blood symbol is both an exacting pastiche and a gross exaggeration of classic noir. As we have seen, film noir is a genre that is a perfect blend of style, mystery, eroticism with a dash of darkness. It was originally used to describe Hollywood crime dramas and harks back to the German expressionist cinematography. The genre went on to influence French New Wave films, but it didn't end there. Many anime directors have also been influenced by film noir, and this shows up in their work. These are not anime films or series that are sweet and saccharine. Instead, they are a more intellectual diversion from the standard fare, unwilling to change and challenge the boundaries of anime, pushing the medium forward. We can see these in movies like Perfect Blue, also the serial experiments Lane, Witch Hunter Robin, Blame, Psycho-Pass, and Gangsta. The above film noir influenced anime movies are all notable and worth watching, but they're only the tip of the iceberg. One particular director who loves to inject his anime with a healthy dose of film noir goodness is Yoshiaki Kawajiri. Many of his more famous anime films were released in the 80s and 90s, and they got significant cult status in Western territories, especially among older anime fans. An example of a neo-noir movie is Nicolas Refn's Drive. Reuters v. Concur described it as a series of comic gore resulting in a bizarre concoction reminiscent of David Lynch's Mulholland Drive or Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, and with angst-laden love scenes that would not be out of place in a Scandinavian drama. According to Refn, Drive is dedicated to filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky and includes shades of Jodorowsky's existentialism. Bold experiments in cinematic storytelling were sometimes attempted during the classic era. Lady in the Lake, for example, is shot entirely from the point of view of protagonist Philip Marlowe. The face of star and director Robert Montgomery is seen only in mirrors. The Chase from 1946 takes honorism and fatalism as the basis for its fantastical narrative system, redolent of certain horror stories, but with little precedent in the context of a putatively realistic genre. In their different ways, both Sunset Boulevard and DOA are tales told by dead men. Latter-day noir has been in the forefront of structural experimentation in popular cinema, as exemplified by such films as Pulp Fiction, Fight Club, and Memento. Thank you for watching! Have you subscribed to this channel? Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And what are you waiting for? Visit us at exhibeflix.com for great movies and follow other film lovers.